Okay, looks like most people have logged in. Again, welcome everyone to our webinar. I hope you're all staying well and healthy. A few things before we get started. If you have any questions at all during the presentation, please place them in the Q&A window below for us to collect. Towards the end of the presentation, Philip, our speaker, will be able to respond to them. So our webinar for today is Multilingual Omnichannel Communication. We'll be discussing how we can leverage the power of productivity tools like Office 365 and machine translation technology to create a powerful global communication tool for businesses worldwide. Today's presenter is Philip Steiger. He's our technical account manager here at SYSTRAN, focusing on technical training and assisting customers with making the best use of their technology. Philip has been with us for over 8 years now and is an expert in all things machine translation and can even speak several different languages himself. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Philip to get us started.
All right, looks like I was muted. So yes, hello everybody. Thank you very much, CJ. We are going to talk about multi-channel communication, omni-channel really, and what does it mean? It's when you have different ways that you need to reach people. You get emails, you get attachments, you have files, you make presentations, and one of the tools that we will talk about mostly today is the new add-in for Office and for Outlook, 365 in particular. So we've taken a quick introductions here. Before we really get into it, we'll take a look at a quick history reminder, right? We've done some of this for a while. We'll take a look at what we already do for MS Office and MS Outlook. And then we'll dive into the new version, the new kid on the block, so to speak, which is for Office 365 in a couple of different environments. And then perhaps also wishes for the future, like what to expect next. This is relatively new release, so there is some future capabilities perhaps, and open invitation to see what you would like to see. And then hopefully also we'll have time for some live demo. So let's get started. Right? We've done this for a little while. Let's take a look at past solutions for translating in MS Office. Or MS Outlook, or even files that came from there, but you don't necessarily have the application anymore, right? So what that means is that you might do a translation of files, of course. You have the web interface, or you have some other ways to submit a file. And that's usually the technique that you use if you have a fairly large document. It might be a doc, a docx, PowerPoint, Excel, a variety of formats. You can also right-click a file that you have on your Windows desktop if you have installed what we call the application pack. So you can right-click the file and see an option for SYSTRAN Translate. If it is a file, though, that's in a format that the server itself doesn't handle directly, like, for instance, an email file, .msg or .eml, we have a solution for that as well. We call it the S-Box, SYSTRAN box. Essentially, you create a shared folder, you drop the files in, it goes, grabs it, converts it, or pre-processes it, because it might be something like HTML file, a version of a message of an email. It might be plain text, it might be RTF. So there's a variety of different scenarios. Keyboard shortcuts too. Those are perhaps my favorite, right? You see something in an email that just came in and you want to see what's the subject line or what's just this particular section. So you don't have to translate it all necessarily. Keyboard shortcuts are great to translate even in environments where you don't actually have an add-on or an add-in or a plugin or anything like that available, as long as you can select it. And in fact, sometimes you can select it, or you don't want to take the time of highlighting something and having it copied, translated, and pasted back to the clipboard. That's what the Omni Translator does. It uses the accessibility layer. And in that case, you simply move around with the cursor, and as you hover over something, it will see if it finds some text in there, not the one that you see in the visible layer, but behind it, there is a thing called accessibility layer. If it sees something, typically it's a copy of the same web page, it will translate that. So you can just hover over it and see that translating. So that's great for quickly checking. Maybe you're using a piece of software that has an interface in a different language, and that can help you too. And then, of course, there's a number of toolbars. We've done toolbars, plugins, add-ins for a variety of applications. You may recognize, if you've had those already, you'll recognize something like a SYSTRAN option along the menu bar. And when you see that, you'll see options to select some text, to replace the translation, or insert and add it, and so on. And so now we're doing something similar, but for Office 365. So let's introduce and talk about that. This is fairly new. We just, I would say, a couple of weeks ago released that first version, 1.0, and obviously there will be updates. What it does is essentially establish a connection to a translation server. You say which one, we'll see how to do that. And you can have it in Outlook for your emails that you're looking at, but also in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Right. It uses a new Microsoft Office add-in framework, which uses MS JavaScript API. And because of that, it is compatible with a number of different environments. It is good for Office 365 in different releases, different versions of it, different versions of the applications. It could be an installed app, or it could be the online version. But also, and perhaps most excitingly, it's not only for Windows, it's also for Mac OS. If you look here, is a screenshot on a Mac, and you have the same option as you see here on my Windows desktop. So this opens it up to a larger community of users. And it's very exciting to see some extra notes on the installation of it. I'm not going to go through the entire installation process. Some of it I can't actually do because it does require, there's a centralized deployment mode. It does require an administrator, right, that can automatically deploy it to the different users, right? But there is also a side loading option, side loading deployment that we can also use, and that's for Office on the web. And it's convenient because in that case, you simply need to go through, you do not need to go through an administrator. You'll simply find more actions, you'll get the add-ins once it's released. I think that 2 weeks ago, I was still in the process of, certification or something, in the process of getting released. By now, I don't know, I didn't check today. But pretty soon you'll be able to simply install that through the mechanisms offered by Office 365. And then, so the question is, well, once you've gotten that add-in, how do you configure it? That's a fairly straightforward thing, right? You click the icon, you'll get some sort of a welcome message initially, you'll click the button to get started. And the first choice you need to say is, well, where is my server? The one that's actually going to do that translation. So the add-in is going to try to connect to that. You'll need to also provide credentials, but you need to, in fact, depending on which server it is, your own, like a SYSTRAN pure neural server, or the one that we host cloud hosted, Translate Pro. Depending on which one it is, you're going to need to also provide the URL. If it's our own that we host as a cloud Translate Pro, we know where the URL is, so we fill that in automatically. But if it's yours, if it's your server, you need to provide the URL to that. After that, you'll go into a screen for the authentication. You'll provide your username, password, and log in and establish that connection. And then at that point, you're ready to start using it. So it's a fairly straightforward and natural mechanism. And let's take a look at the add-in first for Outlook. That is, you're reading emails, right? And so when you click that icon, you'll see a window on the side that shows currently 3 different options. There is a translate option, there is languages available. That's, after having established a connection to a server, it should be able to tell you what are the languages that are available. And also the gear for the settings, in case you need to change them. Like if you change your password, or if you're actually switching to a different server, you want to be able to do that right there. Down below that, you'll see the languages that you currently have selected from language to language. You can switch. You can also choose a different translation profile or one specific one, rather than leave it to the system to decide which translation profile to use. And then at this point, it's simply waiting, right? So that depends actually on what you're doing, what type of document you're looking at. An email that you just received, it's in a read mode. or an email that you're composing, you're writing, you're creating, maybe you're forwarding something and you get into this write mode. So it's easy to operate. When it's an outgoing email, you simply select the text that you want to see translated, right? And so you highlight it and it automatically goes and translates it. When it's an incoming email, meaning you're not in write mode, the entire email simply is auto translated. The moment you open that email, if you have this thing selected and you have a target language, the source might be auto mode, but it's better if you actually say what the language is. You can at that point have the entire email translated. It is currently text translation, at least last time I checked. So soon we'll have some other features and capabilities with better handling of formatting, such as HTML tags indicating images and other formatting content. Click a button to have it back into your document, right? So you'll see that when you're reading, you're not writing it back to a document. You might copy paste it somewhere else if you want to, but most of the time it's because you want to just understand what's that email saying. But if you're actually composing, if you're writing that email, you want a quick way to take that translation and send it back into the same place. And we'll see a couple of different scenarios for that actually. So there are two scenarios. One is incoming email. The other one is outgoing email. Let's take a look at both. Incoming, you'll translate the whole email, right? And attachments, though, it's not going to translate them right there in the email. However, you can open them. And if they are attachments such as a Word document, a PowerPoint, or an Excel, there are add-ins for those too. So the moment you open one of these attachments, such as a Word document, you'll have the option to translate it much the same way. If it's outgoing, you select what to translate. And the moment you do that, it's going to do the translation. If you already have selected everything else that it needs to know, such as the source and the target language especially. There's also another feature that you'll see on occasion. It depends on the language, it depends on the number of other things, but there is also a lookup of the dictionary lookup where it can tell you some alternate meanings or different ways to translate a particular term by itself. So translating an email here, incoming, you launch the add-in, you can have it auto-detect the source. If you select an icon, a portion of the text, it will then translate that. The moment you have a target, you need to have a target language. It is neural machine translation, but it's not reading your brain or your mind just yet. So you need to tell the target language. You can leave it for auto detect for the source. It's better if you actually select the source language, of course, because this plus button then gives you choices of translation profiles that may be appropriate for different domains. If it's a technical doc, if it's, maybe something sales, marketing related, it might translate differently. You might want to use a different domain oriented profile for that. And then once you have that translation, one thing you can do is you select it right there from here and you can decide what to do next with it, right? Maybe you translated that just to get an idea of what's it saying, but you might also actually translate it because you want to put that somewhere else in the translated language. So you can copy that and then paste it somewhere else. And for the outgoing email, it's even a little bit simpler because there is a shortcut there, right? So you select the target language. This is an example where we have the auto detect, and then it tells you which language it found. And so it shows the selected text that I had here, and then it will translate it. And at that point, if you want, in fact, that same selected text replaced by its translation, you simply click the replace selection. Right. Now, that's not always what you want to do. Sometimes you want to keep both. In that case, you simply go here and select that. So then that is no longer selected here. And you can copy this and paste it maybe below, above it, or even in a different document. It's in the clipboard and you can decide what to do with it at that point. So here is an example where we actually do that for an email that we translate to Korean, and this was on a Mac. So, as a summary, we click the SYSTRAN icon right there. You see the interface. You can grab this. There's a vertical separation bar. You can adjust how much of it is showing the translation side, how much is the original. Very natural use case here. And then let's take a look at a few others. There's add-in the same thing for Word, Microsoft Word. You'll essentially, start here you have it, let's say this is a technical document, for example, right? You have some parts you don't want to translate, there are images, some parts you might still not want to translate because they are in fact perhaps to be kept in English, or for some other reasons, right? You might have somebody else look at it and do a translation. But the moment you identify a sentence that you want to translate, even if it has typos here, I feel this one is missing a D. What you do is you select it, right? And it gets translated automatically. And the moment you have that, you can simply replace it. Click the replace selection. So that entire selection that it came from to get it translated goes right back in there. So that allows you to do a more of an interactive step-by-step, maybe sentence by sentence or chapter by chapter translation. It's of course a different approach than if, for instance, you wanted to use simply upload the file, come back when it's done, and then the whole file is translated. But this is an interesting mechanism that you can use when you have something, or like if you need to fine tune the page layout as you translate, because, you know, sometimes sentences suddenly go from one line to 2 lines if it's too long after translation, that sort of things. So here we've done this for a few of these lines, translated what used to be English into Italian, and pretty much you'll have that pretty soon you'll have that entire sentence, that entire document, that page translated. And in fact, here is one that I like to highlight, sort of, and maybe we'll do this one as a live demo too. What if you have a single page or multiple pages? You have a document in which you have something you need to get into multiple languages, right? So it's sort of a multilingual target. You have a single English document, maybe a chapter that's sort of a thank you note to a customer, right? Maybe you're a furniture manufacturer and you ship that, and along with this furniture you send this flyer that shows in as many languages as you can support. You show a thank you note initially written in English, and so you can very quickly do that. You simply select the one, maybe the first one you'll keep in English, then you have another one here, exactly the same text, copy it, you select it, the moment it's selected, automatically it gets translated to the chosen target language. Here it's Spanish, and then you replace it, right? And then you go down and select the next one. And as you select the next one, it translates to Spanish, but let's say now you want German or French or another language. Gradually, you'll simply have them, select, translate, replace. Select the next one, translate, replace, going through that really quickly. And very similar also in Excel. Now, here's an example that's perhaps for software developers, or let's say you have software strings in a spreadsheet. You might select a portion of them, and by selecting them, they get automatically translated. And all you do is replace the selection, and they all go back into their respective locations, so you see them all translated. So pretty quick that way to select a whole bunch of cells that you want to get translated. Not necessarily everything. Maybe some of them you need to do a little bit of post editing. Maybe some of them you don't want to translate. So quite a bit of flexibility. Same thing with the Microsoft PowerPoint scenario. So you have, you could, of course, simply translate it by uploading that to the server, have it translated, and then after that, do your post editing in the translated case. But if you have a presentation and a couple of slides that you want to actually gradually go through it, this is an interesting approach to do that. So you have a slide where we have something already in Spanish. What we did is we had it selected, it automatically gets translated, replace selection. And so there's a couple of others here, maybe actually even the notes, right? If you have notes in your slides, you can do the same thing. And so it says, can we translate the notes too? Yes, we can. And so just selecting that will automatically take it to here, and you can have it translated. And again, click the replace button to put it back in there. So that was a quick walkthrough. Let's take a look at what else we might possibly want, right? I mean, this is good. It's a great start. There's always something missing or something else that you would want to see. And this is as much as a slide on some of my thoughts, but also perhaps an invitation in the questions and answers later to see what else you might come up with. Right now it is translating sort of in text mode. But if you have emails that are HTML format or TF and they have images and lots of formatted content, you might want to retain that. Much of that is going to happen in a subsequent release. We're working on that. Replace versus insert and append. That's also something that that's sort of borrowed from prior or other tools we have as well. The toolbar for the older versions of Office, where you can not only replace, right now we have this button to replace the selection, but another option you might occasionally see is to say, well, how about I want to keep the original? I don't want to replace it. To have a button as a shortcut to say append it, like insert the head before it or append behind it. And that's the thing as well. You can do that simply by selecting the translation and going somewhere else with the cursor and click and say, well, and insert it there, right? So you can already do that. It's just that sometimes people want to have a single button to just do the same. So if you know, that would be something perhaps to hope for as a future capability. I don't know. This is more me thinking out loud. For personally, I like the fact that you can simply copy it to the clipboard and do what you really want to do with it and put it somewhere else. But you know, sending it to the clipboard might actually be an interesting shortcut. Simply say, hey, copy that to the clipboard. I know I'm going to need it somewhere else as I'm perhaps editing another document on another screen or at the same time. And then, in fact, even save as. If you have an email that's a couple of pages long, or if you have a Word document that you opened and you selected a whole bunch of the content, you might want to save that in a file directly. So that could be an interesting feature there too, right? So you don't have to go through a couple of like select, copy, open another Word document, save it there, and then save it to a file. You could possibly do that directly from what's showing in the translation. So let's let our imagination go loose here and explore what else, you know, what other apps could we possibly want to use that with? And I think one of them that certainly is very appealing is MS Teams, right? As you're chatting with colleagues or business contacts, to have translations there. Where else might you want it? I use OneNote a lot, and I love that as a tool. And it would be perfect to have it there. I think there's potential for it to have it because it's using a very similar layout. I don't know if it's really programmatically the same, but there's a good chance that that might also be one place where this new framework will fit there as well. And then beyond that, I would say, tell us what you think. What tools do you use most where it might be really handy to have that same type of functionality, both on the Mac and Windows, if it is indeed an app that exists on both sides and uses that same framework from Microsoft. So at this time, let's go and be a little bit adventurous and see if we can do a live demo. I'm going to stop this presentation and let's see what we have here. So the first one I wanted to do is an email. And that email is on my other screen. Let me grab it over here. There you go. And it's not showing the toolbar. Now, I don't know why. So there's another one here. Let me go back to my Outlook. Oh, I had it turned off. Let me turn it back on and bring it in. I think I should be able to show it there. There you go. It's a little bit small. Let's make it a little bit bigger. And still not running. So that's strange. I had a problem earlier yesterday and I thought it was all working again. Maybe there's an update in progress. So let me see if I can still get some. Oh yeah, I needed to first load a document, right? Open one of these emails. Okay, so we have the plugin right here, and that might be your first experience with it, right? If you look at an email, in fact, let's take a look at this one here. This might be Russian, it might be Serbian, it might be Ukrainian. There's a couple of languages that use the Cyrillic and that they maybe look very similar. I happen to know this one is Russian. So one way to translate this as an incoming email is to use the toolbar from here on. And after initialization, we'll have a couple of options to work with. And if I know it's Russian, let's say if from a business contact, I'm going to switch here, say, translate this from Russian to English, and that selection. So now it basically translated the whole email already. right? Now, it may not have translated absolutely everything. There may be a subject line up here, right? I see here, Privyet Felipe, that's actually hi Philip, and so on. So you see the entire translation. And at that point, this, because we are in read mode, we're not in write mode, we're not composing the whole thing into something else. We could copy paste it to somewhere else. We could possibly, if we have, in fact, translation engines to get it into a different language, such as with Translate Pro, we can have it translated into those other languages. But let's say if I wanted to translate only some parts of it, and in fact translate it in other languages, and maybe multiples of those, right? One easy way to do that is you simply take that as is and you forward it. You don't actually have to forward it, but you go into this mode that way where you're actually writing rather than just reading the email. So now that you're in write mode, if you enable the SYSTRAN add-in, it's going to be prepared to translate, but it's not going through the entire document to translate that up front. What it's doing instead is waiting for you to select something, right? You might say, for instance, here is something, let's go select that. And if it's already saying Russian there, here it translates it. Vielen Dank für Ihre Frage. Merci pour votre question. Pour votre demande. So you could have it translated right there. From the subject line, or you might see some parts are already in English. You don't want to translate that. And then maybe here you're just curious, what is this saying? Select it and it automatically translates. And then at that point, because we are in write mode, you could say, you know what, I need this in English, right? So if you replace selection, it puts it right in there. If instead you didn't want to replace it, if instead you wanted to copy it below it, you can do that. You can simply select it right there. Right click to copy or Control C as a shortcut. Then you break this selection you had so far, right? And you go somewhere else. And so you could say here, for instance, insert, and it's in the clipboard since we copied it. And now here you have the English. And that's about it. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward way to using this. You can select a portion of the text, have it translated for some of the languages. You'll see down here also some extra dictionary lookup. Right, so that can give you some extra alternate meanings or other ways to translate some of the terms. And let's see perhaps one more example from a different environment, which is Word. And for that, what I'll do is I'll first show the result I'm trying to reach. Let me go back and grab that from the other screen. Right, so here is a document that I briefly showed in the presentation where we have something in English. And in fact, originally we had it in English again and again, the exact same document. But then we selected one and had it translated, selected the next one, had it translated. Looks like there's one we skipped that we didn't translate. Let's start with the one that is still in its original, all of this in English. And how to go about translating that? Well, you simply use this add-in. Maybe make this a little bit bigger. I think a recent feature I saw the other day is that you'll be able to actually move it also. Yeah, there's an option to move it somewhere else, right? So you can have it floating. You don't have to have it necessarily stuck on the right side. And so let's say I want to have this from English to Russian. So I'm gonna say, let's go here. Let's say I want this entire thing here selected and wait for that to translate. Now here's the original that's for my selection. Here's the translation and replace the selection. Then I simply go to the next one. Select this one. It automatically goes and translates. It's still in Russian, right? This time I want Spanish or I want something else. So I'm going to go to Spanish and there it is. Simply replace the selection. And so you can see how step by step you can translate it in multiple different documents. All right, well, that pretty much sums it up. At this time, I would like to open it to questions.
All right, thank you so much, Philip, for giving us all your wisdom on this. So the questions we have here today, first one I have here is, what if it's a really long document or email? If you don't want to open a big email like that to launch in the add-in because it may take a long time to translate it, but it's in an email file.
Right. So there's actually a couple of questions I hear there. Right. It's in an email file. That adds perhaps the first challenge because that would probably be like a .msg file or a EML file, typically seen on the Mac. So our translation server doesn't actually take these as files directly, but you can, with a thing that we call the S box, you can simply drop that into a folder. It could even be a shared folder for a collaborative environment. And so the S box is the SYSTRAN box, a place where you can drop your file and even a email file, or like MSG file, and it will analyze it, it will process it. Sometimes it's a plain text email, so it sends it as text file. Sometimes it's a HTML email, it sends it as HTML. Sometimes it's an RTF email, it sends it in RTF format. And also if there are attachments, as long as there are attachments that are in formats it also understands, it will send that. So I would say if you have the scenario where it's a file that you don't open, or it's too big to have it opened, I would perhaps save it out. Like in Outlook, you can save it out as HTML, for example, and then submit that as a file translation. If it is a long, let's say a 50-page document or something like that, you probably wouldn't want to do that and wait for this here to translate. I mean, it may still be done in a few seconds or maybe half a minute, but still that's sometimes, depending on your other things to do, this might just be considered something you'd rather do in the background, right, as a batch translation request. The S box is a good way to do that. That's the shared folder approach. Really great, especially if you have a whole bunch of users that need to drop their files into the same common folder for a project that they're all working on together. And you don't need them to have login credentials or API keys. It's all hidden and running behind a shared folder. So that would be another way to do that. I would say this is a better tool when you want to do a little piecemeal, right? You want to look for one chapter or maybe 1 or 2 pages, something that's a little bit more minute and detailed. Then this is probably a better solution there. But there's a couple of others too that could be keyboard shortcuts. So you pick and choose what part you want to select and translate as you go through that. Those are other tools that I mentioned earlier.
Perfect. And next question we have is, if we have a single user license, can others in the organization get add-in, or is it only for the single user? And if we only have French or English, for example, will this work for a couple of other different languages?
So you need the translation language on the server that you connect to, right? Initially you saw we need to establish that connection. And when you have that connection, or if you change it, you need to be able to log in. It's asking for a username, password. So you need to have an account on that server to be able to use it through this mechanism. If you go here, you'll see that interface where it's going to say which server do you want to connect to. Do you want to change any of that? So you can go back here or you can log out and break that connection. It's going to ask you again where you want to go. So there's a couple of ways you need to establish that connection, so the add-in is there. And in that sense, you do need, each user that would use that would probably want its own account. Technically speaking, you don't necessarily have to, right? You could possibly have a department with 20 users and you simply have a department-wide account and you share that with everybody. Say, hey, everybody use that. But that opens it to questions about confidentiality and is everybody really shielded from each other? It's not the mode you want to be in if you want to absolutely be in control of what you see and nobody else sees. Also, especially if you want to be in control of what are the profiles. Because when you see here the profiles that may be available for English or Spanish, there may be dozens for you, but only a few for somebody else. And if you have a shared account, you start basically all have the same scenario. And that may be what you want. So in some cases, that's fine too.
Okay. And next question is, what happens if you don't know which language the email is that came in? For example, I may recognize it as Cyrillic script, but I can't tell if it's Russian or Serbian or Ukrainian.
Oh yeah. That sounds like actually what I hinted at a little bit earlier. Whether it's Arabic and Farsi looks very similar to me. Even kanji could be Chinese or Japanese, unless there is a lot of non-kanji add-on on the Japanese side. Katakana, hiragana may make it easier for me to guess that this is Japanese. But if I'm not the expert at it at all, yeah, Russian, Cyrillic. There's a couple of languages that are similar that use the Cyrillic script. And so there is an option here where you could say, okay, I don't know, let's do an auto detect, right? And translate it to Spanish. Now, it's only going to translate that successfully if it actually has an engine for whatever it detects. And so this better be a good amount of text. If it's only 2 or 3 words, chances are it may get the wrong one. And if you don't, let's say it finds Portuguese to you say Portuguese to Spanish, but it doesn't have Portuguese and it was actually Spanish, or you're doing Spanish to English or something like that. This works here because we have a lot of content. It needs typically about 20, 21 characters in most cases to be somewhat reliable in terms of the language detection. Now, there are some cases where even just 2 or 3 words are unique enough that it has no problem with it. But if you do, let's say here, I want to go to, let's see, what do we have? German maybe, or French. Spanish to French, I think I have on that server. So it should be able to see that. And you see it right here. It tells you which one it found, right? If you disagree, if you have reasons to think, no, there's no way this is the language that it detects, then of course you'll want to take a look at it, maybe on a different piece that's the same language. Yeah, that's certainly something you can do if you have the languages. This one is probably going to be Swedish. Yep, Swedish to French. It looks like we have that one here too. Here's the one that I recognize as Italian. I'm pretty sure we do have Italian to French. Yep, there it is. So it can do that. If you don't know what the language is, in many cases, it will be able to help you detect that. But it's not necessarily the only way you want it translated, right? Once you've detected that that's Italian, it may be advantageous to tell it, okay, let's translate that from Italian and see if there are in fact more than one profiles available. If you have just one profile, it's not going to give you any other options. And here I do have only one. But if you had multiple profiles, it might give you one perhaps that's not in a generic domain. Maybe one is in IT or medical, automotive repair, whatever it is that you're translating. You might get better translations that way if you have a domain-specific profile available. And you don't know which ones unless you know what the source language is. Source and target are needed for it to give you the list of available profiles in that language pair.
Perfect. I believe that's all we have time for today. For the questions that we missed, we'll go ahead and address those in a follow-up email along with some supplemental information and the recording of the webinar. Also, if you have any questions, you can contact us in the email on screen there that Philip has on, beyondlanguage@systrangroup.com. And I actually wanted to mention as well that we are hosting a virtual event specifically for small, medium businesses. Let me pull up the landing page for that real quick. So it's called Building Blocks to Going Global. It's an event specifically for small, medium businesses where we'll be featuring globalization experts, each sharing best practices, tactical tips, taking place at the international level. So if you'd like to learn more about that, we can also add that into the follow-up email. And I would like to thank Philip for his time today and his expertise on this subject. He'll actually be also presenting a similar topic at that virtual event. So,
of course, thank you very much.
Yep, and I want to thank everybody for being here today. I hope you guys walked away with some educational information, and hope you have a wonderful day and take care.